and welcome to the latest in the TechFire series. This series of briefings is aimed at interactivity so that you get the answers to the questions on the technology issues that are pressing for you at the moment, our burning questions. My name is Paul Hearns. I'm editor of TechPro magazine and chair of this series of briefings. And this morning's session is in association with Comtrade, and it's looking at whether a new style of outsourcing is emerging to meet the current needs of businesses. So there are a number of influences on this and a number of trends and predictions around it, so we'll go through that. So essentially, the whole sort of mobile world in particular has really accelerated what people expect in terms of delivery. And certain aspects of the business need to change what they do to keep up with those kinds of deliveries. So how is this really affecting the way that technology is outsourced and the partnerships are developing? So offshoring is really changing now as well, and it's moving towards hybrid models. So people are sourcing from offshore, they're sourcing near-shore, inshore, in-house, and the whole prospect now is entirely different. There are so many sources, and it has a significant impact in the way that they are managed and the way that efficiencies can be derived from them. So the increase in insourcing, again, this is the fact that people are realizing not everything that was initially thought suitable for outsourcing is actually suitable for outsourcing. And again, this is on a very individual basis. Some things are best kept in-house for some companies, and for other companies then it's different. So really it's a horses for courses situation as supporting care. Okay. We'll see if we can get that taken care of. But again, service integration is one of the things that's being brought back in-house. So again, the disparate sources that people are getting services from and the different range of services, again, they're looking for different ways of bringing it together. But again, an advantage is seen in that, and an advantage is seen in keeping that close. So following the period of experimentation, you know, things are beginning to settle down and become a bit more defined. So cloud computing gets grounded. Everybody's talking about cloud computing. Everybody is talking about what it can do, efficiencies, you know, bringing services that were previously only available to the giants down to the mid and the lower levels, things like that. But what's really happening there is that it's getting more defined and refined, and it's getting easier to measure, because people are now able to say what, you know, return on investment can be expected, the metrics for delivery, things like that. So it's becoming much more possible to measure exactly what it means to go to the cloud. And lower cost consulting models are emerging here as well. People are expecting to get this for a lot less. They're expecting to be able to get the expertise they need to set things up, get it moving, and get it efficient and delivering a lot cheaper than they used to. So they're expecting more from their partners up front in terms of consulting. But governance has become much more difficult in this, obviously, because of the range of services, the range of areas that all of these things are being used in. So governance is becoming difficult, and one of the things that's making it difficult is a lack of skills. That people's skills in the area are still only developing. And one of the key points that we're seeing is that people who used to be in the admin bracket, so the IT administrator, the network administrator, the database administrator, a lot of these things are now being delivered as a service. So people are becoming service managers in these areas. So whereas before they may have had a staff of whatever to look after the hands-on elements, now they have virtual machines, now they have VPNs, now they have pipes, and they're managing a service. So a lot of skill change is required in this, and some of it is knowledge transfer from providers, some of it is just cross-skilling, but there appears to be a talent shortage in this area. So this is the push on from it, that businesses are looking for much more from their partners in this area, because it's so new, but also because it's so specific and so individual. Each company will have a different mix of the way that it's comfortable and the way that it is managing risk in actually putting all of this together. So supported here by yet another consultant. And it's really that individualization that we're talking about here, the getting the mix right for the individual company. But part of that again then is best of breed services. So people are now more comfortable taking what they see as the best of the best from whatever source. So essentially, again, the monolithic deals of the past are really becoming refined and more defined. And it's now becoming possible through the technology and through the expertise to be able to cherry pick whatever you want for your business that you think will get you there. So these predictions are coming realities in lots of different examples, and Marco has some very good case studies in terms of people that they've worked with. But one of them that came up just the other day was the Heathrow Airport management company. And the fact that they were bringing certain services back in for agility in the digital space. So again, this is reflecting the fact that marketing is becoming much more aligned with IT. And a large part of that is the hugely accelerated delivery of services. So when somebody says, there's something new we've got to do, how quickly can we get to market? Marketing is a major part of actually taking advantage of having that accelerated delivery capability and getting out there. And agility inside the business is now necessary to be able to take advantage of what IT can now deliver. And it's through this huge pyramid of the service manager, the range of services, and the technology partners who are now working through it. So that's me. And that's just kind of setting the scene for what we're talking about here, and the fact that all of these things are coming together, and it's such a huge brew that it's taking the master brewer to be able to put it together for you. So if anybody needs to contact me, that's my details. We're online at techcentral.ie. TechFire information is on techfire.ie.
So good morning. Good morning. First of all, thank you all for coming. Sometimes I know myself. Sometimes it's not easy to get that early in the morning and come for an event like this. So my name is Dan Kusik. Living last 11 years here in Dublin. So I came over to help with something, and still helping. So Irish people usually struggle with my name. Irish people usually say Dijon. And yesterday we were discussing in the office, and a colleague of mine, he said that I should rename myself to Declan to make it easy for you guys. So for today, it's fine to be Declan as well. I will be okay with that. So what I'm doing, I'm running our Irish and UK business here from Dublin. 15 years with the Comtrade. Comtrade is an international company. We have offices in Adriatic region, US East Coast, West Coast, Dublin, Munich, Austria. What we do, and it's quite correlated actually to what Paul mentioned. 5 years ago, we would say we were in outsourcing business. Today, if you're asking me what we are doing, it's not outsourcing anymore. It's basically we're helping our customers to innovate. So customers would have some dreams, and we would help to fulfill these dreams with technology. And so at the past, it would be more like do it. Today, we are equal partners, and we help companies to do that. Next year we are celebrating 25 years. So long-term business and a lot of experience. We basically started that business in Europe, one of the pioneers of the business. So topic for today, again, quite correlated to what Paul mentioned. You know, is it really new emerging new style of technology partnership? And to validate that, we were thinking how to do it. And to validate that, we said, okay, let's do a survey. Let's ask people what people think about it. And we got 100% responses. And now we'll go through some main points from the survey. So first few slides about demographics. Who are the people who responded. As you can see, the 1/4 is technical people, and 3/4 management, divided between senior and middle management. And we think that that demographic is actually quite good for our question, because topic is equally is important for business people and for technical people. And it illustrates actually quite well if you would ask what kind of demographics we want, that's something we want to have. In terms of industries, long tail, as you can see, but from here, it's actually more than 70%. So people from healthcare, education, manufacturing, technology, financial services, government, 70% of responses are from these industries. In terms of size, obviously, size of the company, topic was interested from companies of both sides, but 70% is more than 100 people. It's quite big companies. And if you see the biggest one, 1,000 plus people. So this topic is obviously very, very interesting for big companies. So first, the logical question: do you outsource? Yes, no, as simple as that. And quite a lot of people said yes, which is expected. But then some people are not outsourcing, and there are reasons why not. You know, why not? The biggest reason is we cover everything internally. Now, to look under the hood, what could be a reason for that? You know, sometimes people have a legacy application, you know, or very niche area, and are you going to outsource? No, because it's not easy to find skills. It's not easy. Make no sense to outsource. So probably there is a lot of that. But what we were interested in, okay, from these companies who are not outsourcing, in which industries they are. And telecoms is quite a big part of it. So if you see telecoms, they could cover everything themselves. So that's about who is not outsourcing. Obviously, we are more interested into who is outsourcing and why and all of that, and then the rest of the presentation is going to be about that. So first slide on that topic is correlation between size of the company and number of outsourcing partners. And if you think about it, intuition would say bigger the company, more outsourcing partners. And that slides perfectly illustrate this. So small companies, number of partners is usually 1, 2, 3. Then as company grows, you see, for example, here they have already 4 partners. And then big companies, the biggest part is actually so more than 50, or let's say 50% of the companies have more than 5 partners. So again, this time intuition worked quite well, and based on the data, it illustrates quite well the point that as companies are growing, more outsourcing partners is usually required. And then that also requires management challenges, how to manage all of that and that kind of things. So why people are outsourcing? The most responses, more specialized knowledge, and again quite in line with what Paul mentioned, that skills are rare, skills are required, and today as companies are growing quickly and technology is changing at a very, very fast pace, it's not easy to keep with specialized technology knowledge. And then company they go outside to look for it. The second is delivery flexibility. And again, if you see out there, it's very unpredictable market. Projects are starting, stopping. Today you have projects, tomorrow you have 2 projects, or you have none of them. And then companies are looking to see outsourcing as a way to provide delivery flexibility for them. And that's interesting because we see this too on other markets as well, in Austria and Germany. Quite same picture actually as here in Ireland. But then, from all these reasons, if you had to pick one, which one would you pick? More than 50% equality. And to be honest, we were quite shocked with the answer. We are a long time in business. We started ISO certificates 20 years ago, and we are taking quality as a granted. And we were discussing it a few days ago. It would be, so for us, quality is very basic level. It would be as you go to the restaurant and you hope that they're washing their hands when they're preparing your food. You don't think about that when you go to the restaurant. It's a basic level. So quality, my advice would be, assume quality. Don't expect that. You have to assume that. And then, so that was first surprise. And then second surprise was this. 2% of people, 2% is expecting innovation potential from the partners. So imagine you have 6 partners and you don't actually expect innovation potential. And Marco is with his slides, he's gonna point on that actually, how companies are losing opportunity there and what could be done about that. So then, because we are interested in innovation, we think that our business is more that than actually outsourcing, we ask a few more questions about innovation. Would you benefit from the innovation? Would you benefit from innovative partner? Of course, yes, big vote for yes. So, fine. But innovation is a complex thing, and there are many aspects of innovation. So, on the question, which aspect you think is most important? All of them. So basically, if you see there, nothing is standing out. It's always in 0.5, 0.05. So everything is very important. And then, obviously there is a huge gap. On one side, 2% of people are looking. Actually, only 2% would like to think that innovation is something that is important from their partners. On the other side, 80% of them would like to have partners which are innovative. So the question is actually how to bridge that gap. How first to make innovation more important when you're discussing stuff with your partners. How to put that higher on the agenda. Move from quality. Quality is a done deal, today with technology and everything. And how to actually ask partners to add more value. Because people, you do want that. And it's hard to compete with this one. So on Marco's presentation, Marco our points around that. So that was shortly a result from our survey. In next Tech Pro magazine is going to be more detailed results. And if any questions, they will be around.
Basically, my topic would be, I will talk about the walls. I will talk about the walls that we have built around our companies, our organizations, to protect us from the external environment, from the competition, from the suppliers, and so forth. But these walls today are actually limiting us, actually. So they're not just helping us to protect us, they are slowing us down. And maybe it's time, because so many things have changed, maybe it's time to make some holes in these walls. And I will explain how to do this in the right way so that we benefit from that. So, Agile has brought a lot of changes to software development. It has also brought a lot of understanding about the complexity of the systems, how this complexity changes the way we should deal with those, So maybe the classical approach, waterfall-based classical organization is not the best suited for a very dynamic, unpredictable, complex challenges that we're facing in software. And there are a lot of changes within the company. But the same kind of changes apply also to the external world. So maybe this classical hierarchical outsourcing that can work maybe in a factory kind of environment, maybe this is not the best way for the software business, for the technology business. That is what I talk about, you know. Can we apply the same kind of reasoning, the same kind of change also to the topic of outsourcing? A few words about myself. So I'm from Comtrade, as you heard. So I started 20 years ago as a student, the same way as they are. And that's not a coincidence. Actually, a lot of our employees, out of our 1,500 employees, a lot of them started as student engineers. And then I moved to management position. So I was like, let's say for over 10 years in different levels of management, project management, management of business, carrying around. So services that basically you have it with you on the beach, in the office, at home, and so forth. And this idea that now suddenly you would split this innovation in two parts is not working anymore. It's kind of one process. And there's a lot of change externally, but there's maybe even more change internally that needs to be done in order to cope with this. So we are witnessing some of the biggest changes in management system, processes, business models. And these are some of the topics I'll touch on. So when we talk, let's say, with larger companies, you know, we definitely see what we hear is times are changing, you know. This size matters changed. Now it's speed matters, speed of innovation. So it's not the big fish that is the small one, it's the fast one that wins, you know. So, and this is really specifically with some of the partners that we're talking. They say we're not afraid of our big rivals. We know what they'll do. We are afraid of startups that come and create a completely new market and they take the complete business out of us. The competition is global. For us, for anybody else, we are competing against companies from Canada, Brazil, South Africa, India, China, Vietnam, everywhere. The competition is global. And it will be more and more global. You know, today, it's so easy for me to buy stuff from China, Alibaba, or so forth. It is so easy. In order to be successful, you need to win on the global scale. And this means even more than before, it's important to specialize. So you need to think about what you don't do, which is always difficult. You know, we have so many good ideas, but you need to think what you don't do. And you will need to think about what you really can win on the global scale. And then there is room to do stuff with partners and extend your reach. So open innovation. Open innovation is one of the key platforms how to do it. So who has heard about open innovation before? So few. The idea is actually quite simple. So it's about knowledge. You say, okay, we have some knowledge in our organization, but maybe there is knowledge also outside of the organization that is useful for us. And this can be useful in two directions. So maybe we can benefit, so we take some of the knowledge that is outside of the organization to the benefit of internal development, to innovate faster. That is one option. The other direction is vice versa. So maybe you have some important knowledge internally, but you don't have the right channels to the market. It is not your business. And that would be the other direction. Maybe you share this knowledge with somebody else that can make the benefit for both of the partners. So it is inflow, outflow of the knowledge. That's what the open innovation is about. And there are 5 different models, but I will touch basically only on the first 2. So the first one is product platforming. The second one is collaborative design and development. So let's start with the first one. And I will start with the global, the famous example that everybody knows. And I will start with this because it was really inspiration for many of the things that we have done. And I think it really shows, maybe in the best way, the power of product platforming. So the idea is basically that you don't finish the product yourself, but actually you have it half finished and you allow other companies to finish the product for you. And the benefit can be huge. So if you are able to attract ecosystem of partners that are innovative around this platform, that can be really the winning strategy. And that was definitely a key reason why Nokia with Symbian platform, that was very close, we work with it, you can work, you can extend it, but it's very difficult. In a matter of like 2 years, they lost against a much kind of stronger platforms. And the funny thing is, these two competitors that came, so basically Apple and Android, they're not the same. So Apple is not a very open platform, but it is open in the right way. And Android is a very open approach. And here's a memo, so just a short from a letter from CEO of Nokia when the ship was going down, but he wrote the letter and he gave it the title, "Our platform is burning," you know. And in there, I think it's the best testimonial of how powerful these platforms can be. So I recommend to read it. The same concept we took, let's say, with HP, and I will talk about the first case study. Basically, we are working with HP for quite some time. We are working on a couple of things. One is data protector product, basically backup, enterprise backup product. Well established, 50,000 enterprise clients. So what is the problem? The problem is when you are protecting data from banks, telecoms, and so forth, you have huge environment, so many different systems, so many different databases, so many different devices, so many different concepts. And so it turned out, together with HP, with a more classical approach, we have a team like 200, 300 people that barely is able to cope with the complexity of environment. While on the other side, you have maybe some startups that take a very small part of this environment, they make very innovative solution, and they just are gaining the market share. And this is exactly what happened. So you have HP, IBM, EMC on one side, with the big teams with the same challenges, and then there was another company startup that was so the whole market was growing like 5% per year, and you had a startup that was consistently gaining like 150% per year. You know? So something needed to be done, actually. So the idea was the following, and this is actually what we did together with HP. So kind of Apple Store concept. So HP said, let's not focus internally on the whole product. Let's just take the core piece out, and let's create a platform that can be extended. And let's then have like 2 tiers of partners that can complement this platform. The first tier would be kind of really strategic, close partners that have access to maybe some privileged information. And the last tier would be kind of open. Anybody who can contribute, who wants to contribute, can contribute. And this is what we did. What are the steps needed? So we needed to change the product, obviously, open it up, create the interfaces, create a new deployment process, and so forth. But also we needed to talk about business model. So this is something I would really like to iterate. It's not just a technology change, it's also a business model change. And it was like a 15-month discussion to find a really value-based business model that works. And it does work, actually. So Gartner sees it work. There's more innovation coming. We see it working, and also HP sees it working. You know, so this is a statement from a general manager of this unit. So this is like a $300 million unit from HP. That really, I mean, I think shows that if you choose a different model, you can get a lot more innovation out of it. So that's the point. Second example is Skrill. So who knows Skrill? Just to see. So it's not a very famous brand, but it's quite strong, actually, a company. They have 36 million users. They are a payment services company. They're connecting merchant portals with the banks. 160,000 merchant portals, 600 banks. Turning around 15 billion euros every year. Their challenge, they are in this really fast-changing business. So startups all over the place, all the time competition. On the other side, they were last year acquired by venture capital fund for like 600 million, and they have significant pressure to grow very, very fast. And we had the management actually with us on a similar event in Munich this month. And they explained they were looking into classical outsourcing options, but simply this was not possible for them. It is too slow. They cannot define project in that way. Things change too fast, and they need a lot more innovation. So that is why we decided for a collaborative approach, where we do kind of joint planning, joint product marketing, business analysis, architecture, and so forth, the whole lot. And it works, and the first new products actually delivered by this model were just announced recently. So I have a few more slides. We're running out of time, but in any case, this is more a discussion topic than I think to go over it. So kind of like why establish this collaborative model and how to find the best partner. I think this is something that we can really go into a discussion later on. And also some of the challenges. So it's, when you do stuff differently, also you have some different issues like, you need to think about knowledge, trust, human, social issues, and finding the right business model. But in the end, it's worth it. In the end, it is worth it. If you do it right, you can get a lot more value. You can get a lot more innovation. And most importantly, you can become, so I use this term from the book Unboss, I recommend it, you can become so-called unlimited organization. So turning your customers and the whole ecosystem actually into your true partners. So to conclude, I give a little challenge to you, so maybe you can think a little bit, each for your own, do you have some of these walls that maybe were important years ago, but maybe today they're not, and you can break them and actually go into a new model of cooperation. Thank you very much.
So what we're going to do now is we are going to speak to Stephen Hannon, Software Development Manager of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And he's going to talk about his experiences with the company and in dealing with all of this. So Stephen, if you'd like to join me up here, please. So I suppose we just start with a brief description of the company, and it's the context of the Irish operation within the overall, and we'll go on from there.
Sure. So I work for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. We're essentially an education company. So we're one of the largest US-based educational publishers, but we have very much a digital focus. While we have a lot of customers in the US, we're also selling around the world. So I think we're in just over 100 countries. In order to reach that kind of global market, we have a network of partners around the world, and publishers and resellers who have the rights to our content for different markets and sell it. And we also have joint ventures for different key emerging markets as well.
So you have a huge range of standards in terms of not necessarily quality, but in terms of specifications to meet for so many different curricula.
Absolutely, yeah. So like it's been said before that every country in the world has three things that are very unique to it, and one being its education system. So when we develop a product, let's say to teach second level science for maybe we develop initially for the American market, we sell that into Ireland and we sell that into Japan, into South Africa, we have to do extensive changes to that. And so to meet the local curriculum, to maybe teach algebra or whatever it might be in a different way in different markets, we have to redevelop the content, localize it obviously into local languages, that kind of thing as well. So yeah, there's a lot of variety of work that we have to do to support that.
Okay. And as you said, to meet that in so many different territories, obviously then you're talking about different standards, curricula, technology platforms, everything. So the range of partners that you work with is huge.
Yeah, so in international markets we'd work with partners who have the rights to different markets, and we'd work with them to help them kind of localize and adapt our products. But also just for development of our content in the first place and our platforms, we've always worked with outsourced partners. So Some of our partners, for example, we've been working with since the late 90s. And we have partners all over the world, so we might have small little niche partners, say in China, who do science narration in Cantonese or whatever. We might have a few other partners then in maybe India who have 150,000 employees, and they're massive and they do a lot more kind of turnkey solution for us. So we have a huge variety of different partners that have different expertise. I think in total we have, I think it's just over 100 outsourced partners. We have about, for digital development, we have about 45 of those that we use quite regularly then. So yeah, a wide variety of different partners with different expertise, and then we have different models to work with the different partners depending on the project and the needs.
Okay, well, as we've seen from the various slides this morning, all of the various influences, pressures, and expectations that have come on to the market, how have those changes affected the way the company has worked, and yourselves in particular with the base of operations here? Because as we have seen, the speed of change and the number of parameters has increased massively. But given your experience over so many years, how have you seen that change, first of all, and handled it?
Yeah, so I suppose one small area, I suppose, or one key area that we've seen a lot of change in is, I suppose, as a company, we've moved towards more agile development methodologies in the last few years. So whereas in the past we would have had an engagement with, say, 2 or 3 partners on a large project that would be over maybe 18 months. Now we would kind of bring in partners earlier on in the project and maybe work with more partners over the course of the project. Maybe we'll have one partner in doing specialist kind of rapid prototyping earlier on, and then we go out to multiple partners for, let's say, audio production or whatever later on, rather than in the past we'd have kind of just 1 or 2 kind of larger partners who kind of do everything. And we're very much moving towards, at least over the last kind of, I suppose it's taken over the course of about 5 years or so, very much retaining the IP in-house. So all of our development is centered out of, at least the digital content development is centered out of Dublin. So we'd have leads in-house, management in-house, all the functional leads, so QA, business analysts, project managers, lead developers, etc. would all be in-house, but then we'd have partners who provide the production teams. And I suppose, getting back to what I was saying in terms of how that's changed, moving to a more agile development methodology, we would, I suppose, engage with partners quite differently to where we would have in the past. One key thing, I suppose, would be around communication. So we'd have, rather than your typical once a week status meeting that would go on for an hour and a half, we do much more meetings, but much shorter. So you'd have stand-ups of 5 to 15 minutes every morning, as opposed to once a week, kind of getting a status on what's been done and what's going to be done. So every morning on your stand-ups, you'll be going over what's happened since yesterday, what are the key issues at the moment, talking through solutions, and then break off and meet again the next day. But kind of keep the channels of communication open all the time. I suppose that's kind of one key area that's going to change in terms of working with partners.
Yeah. And from a technological viewpoint, as we've seen, the sort of as-a-service delivery model has changed really the way a lot of things are delivered to companies. So instead of the monolithic application, on a cluster of servers somewhere in a data center, things can be delivered down a pipe. Have changes like that fundamentally changed the way you guys work? Because obviously version control must be a huge element of what you do.
Absolutely.
Particularly with so many inputs coming from so many sources. So have those kinds of technological changes come through?
I suppose it's not so much that they've changed so much as that we've always had very kind of detailed processes in place for version control, for management of sources, etc., for sharing of collaborative documentation and assets during the course of a project. We have a lot of systems in place, things like we use Subversion for source control, we use SharePoint for collaborative documentation sharing, we use Confluence as our kind of wiki for all of our documentation, our technical documentation. Yeah, I suppose I wouldn't say that it's kind of changing. It's more, it's kind of, we would kind of take a kind of a continuous improvement approach to kind of processes and systems. So I would still use the kind of same systems that we've always used in terms of managing that. Would kind of change the process maybe to suit the kind of dynamics of the different projects. And even like working in agile development, we do Scrum on one project, we would have Kanban on another, we'd have a more traditional waterfall approach on another project. So it really varies depending on the size of the project and the needs and the requirements of the different deliverables. Like in Dublin each year we do, I think, about 250 digital development projects annually. So there's a huge breadth of different types of projects in terms of the size and scope, etc. So different kind of, I suppose the processes have to be adaptable to suit the nature of the different projects, which are very varied.
Well, that's, again, a point that was made several times already in terms of the methodologies being used within the technology side of things spilling out into other areas of the business.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've experienced?
I suppose, yeah, one key thing that we've seen that's been a very big improvement is that the development teams have been kind of, particularly in the last couple of years, have been brought in much earlier in the project life cycle. So where in the past there'd be an MRD, a marketing requirements document, that would go through a lot of analysis, that would go through what we'd call our editorial or learning design team, and then eventually down the line they bring in the development team, the designers to have a look at it. Whereas now we kind of would come on board as in the development teams and the design teams, we come on board quite upstream, much sooner in the project. So the project life cycle would still be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. But rather than coming on, say, in month 6, we'd be coming on now kind of month 2 and 3, looking at the requirements, doing prototyping, bringing in partners sooner as well, and workshopping different ideas, rather than kind of coming in quite late on and having a kind of set deadline and having to kind of just jump in there the way we've always done it. So it allows us to innovate a bit more, to try different things. We're working in web technologies a lot of emerging technologies, so we're always looking at kind of doing POCs of what ways we can do things better and try out new technologies and alternative approaches to what we've always been doing.
It's a lot of things to be managing.
Yeah.
But you raised another important point there in terms of skills. So you mentioned, say, the move from things like Flash to HTML5 and those kinds of web technologies. But say from there up, and particularly into the management tiers for this, has skills been an issue for you in terms of either getting people up to the right level or getting people with the requisite skills?
Certainly a key challenge that you touched on there was when I think it was in 2012 where Apple kind of announced that they dropped support for Flash on their operating systems and browsers. Up to that point, a lot of our interactive content would have been developed in Flash. We would have been seen as kind of a Flash house in terms of the development of our digital content. So not so much overnight, but over a period of analysis, we decided to switch over to HTML5, JavaScript, CSS-based web technologies, and kind of leave Flash. So that was a huge undertaking because we had a lot of legacy content, which had already been sold into schools, and you typically would have a contract for 7 years. You sell it, you support it for up to 7 years. So the schools had this Flash content that we weren't going to be in the future supporting, so we had to redevelop an awful lot of content from Flash into HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That gave us a lot of challenges around upskilling, both internally but also our partners as well. So we were moving to using kind of emerging web technologies when there wasn't a lot of expertise out there in the industry, so we had to really kind of do a lot of research into it and upskill ourselves, as I said, and our partners at the same time. But we got through them, like we have a wealth of experience now, which is great, and we got in there ahead of our competition in terms of we've got an awful lot of our content now, the majority of it redeveloped, working on mobile devices, etc., using web technologies, whereas some of our competitors would still be kind of going through that kind of process that we kind of managed about 18 months redeveloping all of our content, whereas typically that amount of work would have taken maybe 5 years previous then in terms of the throughputs, etc. So we had up to, I think we had outsourced about just over 500 engineers kind of our peak during that time in 2013. So we had large teams working on a lot of projects. And yeah, there's challenges there, but we gained an awful lot as a company, and our partners as well, in terms of the experience we got from developing that content.
And again, referencing one of Marco's slides there, and it's not necessarily size or scale that's the important thing. It's, as you said, it's speed, getting in there and getting to the cutting edge of it. But as you said, the timeline that it happened, the sort of the move away from Flash, it happened as a lot of these trends were affecting the way that people were looking for technology partnerships anyway. So the two changes probably worked together for you, did they, in terms of the closer relationships and collaboration with partners?
Yeah, I'd say so, definitely. I mean, between moving to more agile development methodologies, the move from to web technologies instead of Flash, and also the move towards supporting mobile devices and tablets, as opposed to just kind of your typical kind of PC in a lab. Now kids have mobile phones and tablets, and they're taking it offline. So there's a lot of kind of changes in the technology, and for our customers as well, and for ourselves, for development, all kind of happening together. So it's kind of a perfect storm of change, but coming through it, we really reap the benefits, because we had no option, kind of just roll up our sleeves and get in there and really kind of tackle it. And it worked out very well, I must say.
Okay. Well, I suppose then, looking forward in terms of these developing relationships, as you said, partners are involved earlier.
Yeah.
There's a closer collaboration. There's more open lines of communication for more frequent communication. So, where do you see it going in terms of leveraging that further? And I suppose again, the accelerated cycle of all of this underneath as a constant theme.
Sometimes, as I said, since we originally started in Dublin as Riverdeep in the kind of late 90s, since that time we've always outsourced, but we do it in so many different ways. So now I suppose what we're seeing that we wouldn't have in the past is bringing on kind of smaller partners at times for kind of a niche kind of expertise. Let's say, for example, Unity 3D for mobile development, we wouldn't have in-house talent at one point, and that's we brought on kind of a small local kind of bespoke boutique partners to do some development on it. And as we kind of built up our internal knowledge of it, we're able to kind of rely on a partner to kind of supplement that. So that's kind of one area that we wouldn't have done as much in the past. And then we're still outsourcing, a huge kind of volume manual work. It just makes more sense to have that offshore. And so we've always done that. But I suppose what we're seeing now is that we're working with partners to kind of in different ways. So we'd supplement our internal team. So as I said, all of our development leads are based in Dublin, whereas now some development leads at big times would have partner companies come in and provide those, and they'd over time become kind of effectively as part of our internal team. We also have retained teams, so we have dedicated resources in partner companies, whether on-site or offshore, who are dedicated to our account and work on projects. And it gives us a bit more flexibility for moving them from one project to the next, as opposed to doing SOWs and RFPs where a project comes along. You kind of add resources as if they were part of your own team. And they'd also provide what we refer to as bench resources as well. So in times of kind of peak throughput, we can pull on more people in a very quick and kind of within a kind of week you can say we need another 5 resources and we have them kind of thing. And that's something that we wouldn't have had 5-10 years ago. So I suppose that kind of different areas.
But again, it's one of the points from earlier in terms of measurability and manageability as a result, that these processes, despite their complexity and the range and spectrum that they come from, they seem to allow that visibility more, so that they're easy to manage in terms of, as you said, scaling up and down, but also in terms of the way that you can manage the value that you're getting from them.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when you have people from partner companies who are working as part of your internal team, while you retain the IP, because you're not outsourcing it, and kind of it's not a black box. They're kind of in-house working with you, but they're becoming part of your team and they're working with you collaboratively on workshopping and stuff like that. Over time, you can kind of it helps when our company is going to move in doing things differently if they're kind of partners who worked with us for a long time and understand our process, and they can move more. We can kind of bring them along with us more easily than, say, a kind of unseen team offshore who, we just kind of engage with through SOWs or whatever. If they're more tightly combined with it and seen as kind of an extension of our team, it's easier to kind of bring them along with any kind of changes and that kind of thing.
Well, one last point, I noticed one word that hasn't been mentioned at all yet is cost.
Right.
That certainly the perception from the conversation is the fact that the comfort level that the company has from its history in terms of dealing with technology partners, the value that you can see from this, that while cost is important, it doesn't seem to be the driver that it used to be in the past. Is that your experience?
Sure. I suppose one aspect that relating to cost is that we do a lot of innovation in-house in terms of developing frameworks and improvements to processes that effectively drastically can reduce your cost, your throughputs on development of content or platforms. So we kind of put an emphasis on not so much getting a better deal in terms of your rates, etc., but looking at how we do things. So say a development project 3 years ago would have run for 18 months. We can probably do it now in about 2/3 of that time. Just through looking at the way we develop digital content, looking at kind of putting a lot of the focus on upfront development of kind of templates that are then clonable or reusable during production, so that you're doing a lot of work up front, but then when you get to production, you can ramp up and do, let's say we do digital learning objects or lessons, we can do like 80 of them in a week, whereas in the past, each one would have taken 3 weeks to do, just through changes of process, not so much kind of, and I suppose the development of technology in terms of our frameworks that are scalable and configurable to do that. So that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's our only kind of concern around cost, but that's kind of where we channel our energy in terms of cost savings, is to do things quicker and more innovative, to bring in the overall project schedule and to kind of spend money where it matters to save money down the line.
Certainly. It's a result as opposed to a primary driver, that it comes as a consequence of doing.
And it's kind of it's a change of a frame of mind over time. That it's not just about kind of getting more bang for your buck in terms of your rates or whatever. It's about looking at how you do development as a whole. And looking at all the kind of where you put the effort in, and where we can kind of change process to better suit the kind of content that we're developing to kind of get more bang for your buck in terms of the actual effort you're putting in, whether it's in-source or outsource or who's doing the work.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, I think that's given us a really good idea of the specific example that Stephen and HMH has. So what I'd like to do now is we'll invite everybody back up onto the panel, and we'll get Dan and Marco back up. And has Johan joined us? We're also going to have Johan Lonneberg, who is director for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And if the discussion gets technical, he can take some of that too. But just to kick things off a little bit, there were several questions submitted early on in terms of just the nature of what's going on and the changes in outsourcing, the changes in technology partnership. And Marco, you touched on a very important aspect of it there, I think, in that it's really changing the conversations that you're having. They don't start in the same place that they used to. Can you just recover that and maybe elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah, for sure. So it's not just a technical issue anymore. So it's not just engineering. Marketing, product marketing is involved, sales is involved, and so forth. So that's let's say the first difference. So from our side, we need to understand the business case. We need to understand the market. We need to understand the end user needs and so forth. So that is definitely changing. The other thing that is changing is it is not anymore the topic about cost. So the problem with this is it's a two-side equation where one side is much easier to see, to feel, and so forth, cost. And then the other side, the value, it is difficult to measure it. You cannot see it. Maybe you see it only after some time and so forth. You know? So it's an unbalanced equation. That is why many companies say, okay, let's play it safe. Let's focus on the cost. We can see it. The value hopefully will come. But then they run into these issues that you say that they see we get no value. You know, it's no innovation. It is slowing us down. The name of the game is speed. And we have just created a setup that is slowing us down. That doesn't make any, even if it's almost for free. I mean, that doesn't make sense. And that is when they decide, okay, maybe it was the wrong way. Maybe we need to turn it around.
Okay. And in terms of the survey results and what we saw in terms of people saying what was driving them towards these new styles of partnerships, the metrics were pretty uniform in terms of everything seemed important. So maybe then, do you want to comment on that in terms of you know, working with the range of companies that you do from large to small? Where are people coming from in terms of those drivers? And if everything seems to be of equal importance, you know, what's the one that tips them over? Or perhaps what's the first one that seems to produce results?
So just to double check, you're referring to results of innovation and that everything is important. So, you know, when everything is important, nothing is important. You know, and I would think that that's usually first phase when you really think that everything is important. Even though one point was standing out just for a little bit, and that was cost. You know, but I would think that's because of past times and, you know, people focused on saving as opposed to growing.
Older attitudes.
You know, and then it has its own inertia, you know, to get change of the mindset. But we see that that's happening, definitely. But again, to answer your question, you know, usually that's first phase, when everything is important, is nothing is important, and then people start getting it, actually, what is it all about, value, as you said. And then let's see how value could come from us or from someone else.
Okay. And in terms of the range geographically around Europe that you're seeing, are there any particular geographies or perhaps verticals that get it more than others? Obviously, you know, Stephen has a great example, but are there other areas, say, where they have a bit of a lead in this, that the message has got across perhaps because of experiences in the past?
You know, in terms of verticals or horizontals, obviously mobile as such is leading the innovation game. On the other side, and maybe Marco could elaborate about it as well, you know, some industries are very slow, and they're now, for example, automotive industry, car industry. You know, if you see, you know, that they want to charge 1,000 or 1,500 euro for GPS navigation, nonsense, you know, and they're getting it slowly, you know, that they have to change. And you know, to change processes to improve innovation cycle, you know, instead of 3, 5, 4 years to 6 months actually. So I would say mobile definitely on technology side, and then, you know, on industries, Marco, you probably have more.
Maybe just to comment, you know, so we work a lot in Germany, you know, also in automotive industry, and actually I'm surprised they get it actually that with the connected cars, you know, with cloud coming to cars, things will change, you know. And I'm surprised when the big guys are talking to us on an equal level, kind of. We are the car specialists, but we now need IT specialists. I am surprised actually. It's not this classical squeezing, supplier squeezing, like how low can you go, but it's equal discussion. So I think they do get it that in some areas things are different than maybe the classical factory kind of production of the cars that they do for many years. So.
Johan, maybe from the geographical perspective in your coverage area, what's your view on that?
I would not say something about that.
Sure.
But I have another question that goes,
all the way, now we have it.
So maybe you have made the same experience in this mobile device development recently. What I've seen in the DACH region, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, is that many people have started in the marketing department, and all these mobile devices are designed more or less. The graphical user interface is very important. So the marketing department comes into it, makes the beautiful design. When they need to do this mobile app, who do they talk to? The advertising agencies and the graphical user interface. So they go to the marketing department, they go to the advertising agencies, and they ask, could you help us to make this mobile app or mobile device? And they can, and they get some students to do this. And what happens? Have you seen what happens after 1 year, 2 years? This mobile app has been a disaster. And I think you have seen many mobile apps that has been to be reinvented, redone. And actually the mobile app as such is not the big problem. Most of the times you have enterprise apps that are integrated into the business systems in the background. Payment systems, they need to be integrated. You have to think about the security and all of these things. And that's when they are coming back to us and say, could you maybe help us clean this? We need to do it in a different way. Have you had any similar experience in this field?
Has anybody done any mobile app development? Yeah, okay, yeah, there's one or two hands there. And can you comment on it? Was it an initial triumph and then a bit of stumbling, or?
We've had a few instances where students have developed apps all right, and we've had to, where we've been asked to fix them, but I think the primary problem is as it says, it goes through a channel that the business isn't involved in, the marketing department is involved in, and the full thought process isn't thought through, because it's primarily about how it looks and how the user is going to see it, not how it works in the long run. So you do get a bit of it out there.
Okay. Well, as we've seen, scale in this area really doesn't matter, because as we've seen, Ryanair has gone through massive changes of late. Being an e-commerce pioneer initially, and then stumbling and sort of falling over their own philosophy in terms of making things too difficult for people when it should be easy. So at a recent Google event, one of the UK and Ireland level managers made a very important point, and it was something you touched on again, Marco, was the fact that they said that Google respects their competitors, but they don't fear them. And they said what they fear are the startups, the next startup. And your work with HP Autonomy is a very interesting one as well, because in speaking to them recently, one of the key things that they said was that the silicon is not important anymore. That things like virtualization and cloud have developed to the point where it's now the human intelligence, and particularly in storage, it's the algorithms that really make a difference. So the whole emphasis of development has changed. So in that kind of context, as you mentioned, where companies find walls, where they find inflexibility and a lack of speed, I suppose, where do they start? What are the first points that they can begin to start this accelerated development and perhaps lean on partners more and start to get that from them?
So I guess the first thing is to understand that the model itself, so when you go with a control-based model, hierarchical model, so you define the work for an external party to execute. This model limits creativity process tremendously. And it has an issue. So this model can work for complicated system, if I use this complex system theory, but it cannot work for complex adaptive system. So that is a very fundamental change. And most of the things that we are doing are in this complex adaptive system where you need innovation through the whole process. It's not enough to think a little bit at the beginning and then you execute it. This was the waterfall classical style. It worked for some, it still works for some things, for complicated stuff. But for complex situation, you need to apply this sort of iterative thinking. So you need to, every sprint, every iteration, you need to do thinking, creativity comes into play and so forth. And you need to recognize that this classical outsource, let's outsource for 5 years and so forth, forget about it, it will not work. You need to go more into the collaboration. So I think this is where it starts, recognizing the model, so it goes more from the control, from like we will govern it with the legal actions and so forth, into like let's develop a trust-based system that is governed more with the value-based business model. I think this is where it's going.
Okay. So maybe if we just do a show of hands, who would regard their own organization as being comfortable with outsourcing, as reckoning you're deriving value from it? Yeah? Okay, there's about a third of the hands in the room. That's very reassuring, because not only supporting our wider results there about how many people are doing it, but obviously people are getting value from it. In that context, when you go and you have those conversations with companies and they begin to identify those walls and those areas, what is there a single area that is maybe the biggest difficulty? Is there any one area from your side of the fence, as opposed to we saw the results of perceptions, but is there one particular stumbling block you see a lot?
So when you go into the details, of course you have quite some challenges. It's easy to say you replace the control with the trust, but how do you do it? How do you get the trust in place? And that is not trivial. That is not trivial. We have methodology in place for over 20 years how to do it, and you do it step by step. It's not easy. It's easy on the paper, but you have a lot of human, social issues. You have knowledge gaps. You have distance and so forth. So many factors that affect this. So it's not so easy. And the same goes regarding the business model. So it's very easy to say on paper, okay, you change the kind of cost-oriented model for the value-oriented model, but how do you do it really? I explained with HP. I mean, we were negotiating 15 months. So it took some time, some thinking, and on both sides, some digestion. To where do we really want to go? But now we have a framework that is really kind of value-based, and it works. So I think these are the stumbling blocks that we run into, So unfortunately, it's not so simple. Otherwise, many would do it already. So
of course.
And software development processes, we need to be a part of all the different segments, from product definition. Maybe our clients have had problems in designing the new products, and then we help out from the start all the way to quality assurance in the end. And so I think this is maybe the most important part, that we become part of the whole system. That's the only way to drive true innovation forward. And I think there is always room for this, I call it cost-cutting operation of IT, business process outsourcing, that will still all remain, but it's a different ballpark.
Okay. Well, yeah.
We're set up in that we're very adaptable, and so I think I touched on it a few points earlier about projects being very varied in terms of their scope and the requirements specific to projects. So in education, there's a lot of regulations. So if we sell into, obviously, because young kids are using our software, you have to be very cognizant of the security of their data. You have to, in the US, they have what's referred to as 508 compliance. So you have to be, your software has to be accessible. You can't just have 80% of users being able to use it, but I think 17% of US kids are dyslexic. That you have to cater for them as well, so there should be moving text on screen. There's all this kind of criteria that you have to meet when you're developing software for different markets. We sell into ministries of education abroad, so they have very varying and strict regulations and criteria for choosing a provider of educational material, whether it's hardware, software, services, etc. So sometimes they'd have stipulations that a lot of the work, or a percentage of the work, would have to be done locally in their market, which is understandable. So we'd often have joint ventures with other local publishers or suppliers in order to meet those criteria that the work is done locally. So there's tons of different regulations that would have to kind of conform with for different projects, depending on the market. Say, for example, if you're selling an educational content into Texas or Georgia or Florida or California, there's a requirement there to provide Spanish or US Spanish version of the software as well to support the non-native speakers of English in the classroom as well. So all of our content has to be fully internationalized. We have to localize it into Spanish as well, and it has to have the exact same experience for an English-speaking kid who are using the kind of default English version, but also a Spanish-speaking child using the same software has to have Spanish equivalent, has had the same experience and all the same features, etc. A particular team would be one that will work with us for a long time. And so over time, they're very much seen as, like we refer to on a first name basis, like some of them will be requested by project managers on the project that, you know, Natasha or whoever would work on this because they have the experience from doing this before, blah, blah, blah. So they're very much seen as an extension of our own team. In terms of just from a working process, you know, you wouldn't necessarily even have, with a retained team, you wouldn't necessarily have any H&H development leads on the smaller projects. They might just take them on themselves. Whereas bigger projects or with non-retained teams, there's always that ownership within H&H, so there's always a lead developer, etc. But as I said earlier, we would visit on site and have them come over here with partners who are offshore. We don't have any presence in-house on typical projects. We would visit each other. But I suppose there's no kind of, you know, 3 points that you have to do to ensure that happens. It's just about kind of your setup and your kind of your culture within the company and how you work with your partners. And you kind of effectively, particularly with retained teams, you treat them as an extension of your own team that have all the same kind of induction that a new engineering company would have.
So on the intellectual property side of things, then, in terms of ensuring you retain it, because it was something that you mentioned quite specifically a couple of times.
Yeah, that actually works both ways. Some of our partners have very kind of bespoke software development skills that they create their own, say, automation processes, etc. So they, as well as ourselves, are concerned about retaining their, you know, controlling their IP and kind of security of their process, and that you know, we're not using on another project the same kind of tools and sets, etc. that they bring. And also, obviously, from our point of view, we don't want to work with an outsourced partner who develops a new way of teaching maths on an iPad or something, and then, you know, our competitors using it 6 months later because they have the same kind of outsourced partner. So I suppose the ways around that is, I suppose from a legal point of view, it's in the MSA, the Master Service Agreement, that you draw up, and I suppose like we can't really restrict ourselves in terms of not giving access to source code. We have to kind of rely on the kind of the contracts that are drawn up, and again, this is part of when you're vetting new partners, you're doing a lot of analysis and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of behind the scenes and investigation in terms of, you know, what kind of, depending on the market or where they're positioned, the different kind of checks and balances you can put in place in terms of ensuring that, from a legal perspective anyway, that, you know, you own everything that you develop and they don't, and they can't share it, etc. And sometimes we get into partnerships with technology providers. Let's say they provide a piece of software for developing interactive courseware in a templatized way, and we'd have agreements that any kind of templates we create for our products can't be used for the next 8 months by a competitor, but it's part of the licensing agreement we come up with that provider. 8 months is actually quite a long time in our industry, so typically we'd develop, and our competitors would, for the same kind of market, particularly the US market, so you'd have same market date, so you'd have to, say in April, submit for the state of Florida science, and then in June there'd be the state of Georgia, you'd be submitting your maths program. So if your competitors can't use it for these templates, let's say they're maths templates for 8 months, then they've missed that cycle, and it might be another 7 years before maths for Georgia comes up. So it doesn't stop them using it eventually, but at least it gives you that kind of edge, at least for the next project.
Do you find that you know, is changing now? A lot of companies that we deal with have vendor managers and vendor VMOs and all this sort of stuff. They're very much stuck in the old model. They do sometimes talk about value, but it's tell me what value you bring as opposed to how do we collaboratively, you know, talk about the value. And as a vendor in this situation, we only have maybe 10% of the knowledge that the company has. So how do you bridge that gap? What's the steps to get the VMOs to talk about value in a collaborative as opposed to a directive way?
All right. You're exactly right. It's changing slowly with, like you say, about questions like, tell me a little bit about the value that you're bringing, describe it, and so forth. It's difficult to synthesize it in a structured form, that is a fact. what we did here, basically, I mean, in the end, we changed the licensing model. So basically, in this platform, we created separate licensing for the modules that we contribute, and basically, we are compensated on the royalty basis. So that was, but you cannot always do this, you know. So it's not so simple, you know. And also here, I have to say, I mean, this is, as I said, it was not a simple thing. But the cooperation is ongoing for many, many years. We have the trust in place. We have the understanding of the culture and so forth. So we were able to do it in this way, you know. So I don't have a generic answer. I see that there is a change. I think that people do recognize there is the other component. I think they do recognize it is not as trivial to deal with that as it is with the cost component. But I think it's a case-by-case basis, and the best is to talk about the future, to talk about, okay, how will the value be generated, and how you know, who participates and how to split it. I think that's the point. This kind of relationship will only work if it's a win-win, you know, that needs to be clear. And that's when we approach it, that's how we are thinking. So whatever the model will be, it needs to be win-win. So if we create value, it needs to be value for us, it needs to be value for the other partner. I think that's the best kind of guiding principle.
It's something that internally we need to kind of display, like if I'm you know, coming up with an estimate for the cost of a new project, and I'm putting in that I want to, you know, 5 developers in-house doing prototyping for 3 months, I have to explain myself in terms of, well, we haven't done that the last time, and that's quite an expense to incur, but I have to show, or I have to, you know, basically sell that idea internally in terms of why that adds value and why that would, you know, in turn effectively could save us money down the line. But that again becomes easier the next time around. You know, you can show the benefit of the previous project from the guy's point of view. And the same thing. It's I suppose getting in the door first, and then about showing it, you know, over time, building up the different case studies, etc., to show kind of the value add. But yeah, it's difficult to start out with, of course, and you know, you're always talking to someone who understands exactly what that value is. It's about kind of
trust again, and the, I suppose again, the frameworks and the legalities allowing that trust, having the flexibility to establish that and let it grow.
We are a company that builds long-term partnerships, you know, loyal partnerships, like with HP 25 years, other partners, you know, 20, 15 years and so forth. And I think that makes the difference. It is about the culture. In the end, you are deciding, when you go into software development and you're choosing partners, you are choosing based on culture, and culture is very difficult to show. It is really very difficult to show. So the best I think, approach, or when the best mind shift happens is when people visit us and see, and then they decide, is it?
But you have 25 years of culture.
Yeah, true.
Won't necessarily have 25 years.
It's not just a lucky break for you.
Well, perhaps, but I think again, in the entrepreneurial side of things in particular, in the absence of culture, or the absence of a long-established culture, personality and communication skills really are the key in getting those across, because as you point out, and as we've highlighted through the morning, the startups, these often unpredictable and disruptive influences, they're often very much personality. Call it there. Obviously, this conversation has the potential to go on for quite some time. Thank you, everybody, for attending this morning. Thank you to all of our panelists, Johan, Dejan, Marco, and Stephen. Thank you to Comtrade for partnering with us on this to be able to bring it to you. And thank you to each and every one of you for coming this morning.